So this is from NM Randy from New York City. Asks, in regards to forgiveness, what do we do when the ones that hurt us never ask for forgiveness because they either don't know or won't get the chance to do so? Boy, that is a great question, Randy. That's not an easy question, right? I mean, it's easier to answer about the Nephilim or something, right? Because that's kind of, here we are, here are the text, right? So this is something in the text that we have to kind of nuance out of the text. Now, I want to just go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 24 to start. All right, so it's not exactly applicable, but I think it's related. So Jesus said, therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. So what scripture talks about when we are the one who has offended another, we have an obligation to do something. And the time in God's calendar when we really, really, really focus on this, I mean, it should be all year, right? But we don't, right? Because we're human and we forget and etc., right? And so the time of the year that we especially focus on this, getting right with each other, clearing the slate, is the feast of Yom Kippur, right? So Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, this is the day when Jesus took his own blood and he went into the holy of holies, not of this creation, not made with hands, and he offered his own blood on the altar. We read about that in the book of Hebrews. So it's kind of an interesting thing there, right? I mean, we know that Jesus was crucified on Passover, and so he fulfilled that feast. But then we have the feast of Yom Kippur, and according to the book of Hebrews, it was on that. Now we don't know. Again, this is kind of one of these time warp things. How does it work in God's economy? How does time work? He's outside of time. I don't know. But all I know is that he took his blood and he fulfilled the Yom Kippur sacrifice. All right. So the point there is that we are to do everything that we can when we are the one offending. But what happens when somebody offends us? What do we do? Well, there are various things that we can do. I mean, to some extent, we sometimes can go and talk with that person, and say, brother, I just wanted to bring this before you, that I was offended, right? And so Jesus even tells us that um, if there is an altercation or something, that we are to go to our brother first privately. Okay, very important. You first go privately. We're not to make a public spectacle of this. It's not to be on Facebook or on Twitter. We're not to make videos about this and put it out on YouTube. We're supposed to go to that brother directly and discuss this offense. All right, and it could be really all kinds of different offenses. It doesn't have to be a so-called church offense. It doesn't have to be, where it's just something of a sexual nature or you stole something. But hey, you know what? You said something, it hurt, it offended me, and I just want to clear the air. All right, and of course, there's all kinds of techniques to do that. It takes practice, it takes wisdom, and probably the greatest thing is humility. So if somebody has offended you, don't go with your gun loaded. Don't go with, I'm going to show this person and I'm going to lay it all out there. You have to go with humility, and that, all I can say is, it takes practice. It takes sometimes years, decades, and sometimes a lifetime to really figure out how to do that. Now, if the person is unwilling to hear what you're saying, and you're absolutely convinced that you're right. All right. Again, humility is so critical here, because if we go in with this sense of, I'm so right, this person is so wrong, it's going to be hard to make restitution and make resolution, I should say. So again, the goal is the resolution and the restoration of the relationship, not just to prove that you're right. And that's where humility comes in. All right. So now again, you've gone over this, you've looked at the facts, you're humble about this, you're very humble about this, and still this person is not willing to hear you. Then you may need to take another person, but the two of you will go in private. You're not going to put this out there for everybody to hear about. And depending on the kind of offense this is, then you may need to escalate this so that it becomes something that the whole community knows. Now, again, you've got to be very careful because not all offenses need to be publicized. There are some things that happen between a man and a wife. Some things happen between, father and children, and brother to brother, and sometimes those things do not need to get out. All right, so again, it just depends on the type of offense. If it's that you were offended, he said something hurt your feelings, which is not good, but that's the nature of it, then that is something that should be kept, between the two of you, perhaps between, you, him and his wife, or her and her husband, or something like that. Those are the kinds of things that that don't need to get out. If it's something that is affecting the community at large, then you'll need to take this and and bring this eventually before the entire congregation, before the church. So that's a really tough one, and some kind of wounds, they're not the kind of thing that we need to bring this to the public square. It's just something that the person said something, it hurt. I tried to bring it up. I tried to talk about it. That person wasn't willing to listen. Well, what you can do is pray. Prayer is very, very powerful. And what happens through prayer and time is that God's going to do two things. He's going to work in that person, and he's also going to work in you. All right, he's going to work in me. And as time just kind of, like water over rocks, it just kind of smooths them out. Sometimes we see that, what? Maybe I wasn't really so offended. I was offended back then, but now with a few years between that and me, I realized that was kind of silly on my part. I mean, yeah, sure, what this person said didn't feel good, but maybe I was too much of a snowflake back then, and I just needed to toughen up a little bit, right? Or maybe I now I understand where that person was coming from and why the person said those hurtful things they didn't mean to. And you may just readdress it years later and say, what, brother, sister, friend, husband, wife, whatever, you said some things some years ago, and here's how I took it. But you know what? God's really been working in my life, and I understand it better. At least I think I do. And so, I'd still love to just clear the air on this topic, but I've learned a lot about this. And if there's a way that, I would love to just say sorry. It would mean a lot to me if you understood where I was coming from and you could understand my perspective and how that did hurt me. But I'd love to clear this thing up. So those are some ideas. There's a lot more that could be said on that topic. Of course, I cannot resolve the whole thing, but thank you, Randy, for bringing that question. I think that's really a very good question.